In this video, we'll make an HTML5 and CSS3 responsive website from scratch. First, we'll lay out all of the HTML and then the CSS, adding our media queries last to give the website its responsiveness and mobile version. Okay, so let's take a look at how the website's going to appear at its full width here on my computer, and then we'll check it out for the mobile version on tablets or iPhones, for example. So at the top left of the website, we have our logo here for Rocket Design with the RD. Then we have our navigation menu on the right, followed by the image slider beneath that, and then these icons in 1/3 sections, which you're going to learn how to change later in the video to your own icons and text. Then we have a text section on the left, an image on the right, and then these 1/3 sections with titles, images, and paragraph text beneath that. So at the bottom in our footer, we have another navigation menu down here so we can go to other pages from the bottom of the website. Then we have the social media links sending us to social media pages as well as email, and then at the very bottom we have the little Rocket Design copyright symbol there. Okay, so let's size the website down and see how it's going to transform as we change the width of the website. So around 768 pixels, it's going to go from the full width version with the multiple column sections down to this one column responsive design for mobile tablets and cell phones. So the navigation is going to turn into this drop-down navigation with kind of the hamburger logo or icon at the top right, and then you'll see that all of the sections will line up quite nicely in the single column here at 100% width. So here we'll take a quick look at how it's going to appear on about the size of an iPhone 7 as we scroll down through it. And you'll notice that the text and titles and icons have also changed their size as we size the website down. So we'll learn how to do all of that later in the CSS. Let's take another quick look here and then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm just going to size this back up so you can see the transformation take place when we go from the single columns to, say, the 3 columns, for example, towards the bottom there. Okay. All right. So the cool thing about this website is most of the content is going to stay centered on the page in the white section, but at the bottom, this blue and kind of purple section is going to be 100% of the screen, no matter how wide we flex the website. So that's a cool little trick with HTML and CSS that we'll learn throughout the video. Alright, so the one thing that we'll need to get started to do this tutorial are the starter files. So in the description of the video, there's going to be a little link to my website where you can download these starter files, and then once you open them up, we can go ahead and get started. So pause the video if you need to, and then you can start by opening up index.html in your web browser. So in this case, I'm going to be using Google Chrome, and then for the text editor, I'm going to be using Sublime Text 2. I think they might have Sublime Text 3 out also now, which is free, as well as a program called Brackets, which is also really good as a text editor. So once you get your text editor ready, go ahead and just open up index.html and style.css in it, and then we'll go over some of the starter information that's included for you here, so we can go ahead and jump right into designing the website. So as we're going over all of the starter files, along with the information that's included here in the HTML and CSS for us already, we're going to kind of link these files to where they display inside of the HTML document here. So at the top of the document we have the HTML tag, which is going to span the whole website, and then let me just create a little space here for while we're working on it. So then inside of the HTML tag for the document itself, we're going to have, after language English, we'll have the head section and then the body section of the website. So the body section is where everything is going to actually display on the website, all of the content, and the head section is where the web browser is going to get the information it needs to display the website how we want it. So this is going to reference all the files that we have in the starter files as well as some other stuff. So the character set that we're using is a standard UTF-8, and then underneath that is a tag referencing Internet Explorer for compatibility, so the website looks the same across the web, including Internet Explorer. Then we have another meta name tag here for viewport. This is for mobile devices, the initial scale 1 tag. Okay, and then if we drop down, next we have the title tag of the website, and I'll show you where that displays in just a second, along with the shortcut icon or fave icon. So let me just show you what the fave icon is first, and then I'll show you where they both display on the web browser. So here is the icon referenced in image icons fave icon.png, and then let's take a quick look at where you can find the title and fave icon when you're looking at your web browser. Okay, so up here where it says Rocket Design Mobile Web Design Services, that's the title of the website, and then the little icon to the left of it is the fave icon. So you can change the fave icon image if you like, but just remember that it's best to have it square and relatively small. So about 40 pixels by 40 pixels is the best size. Okay, so let's look at a few of the other things here in reference. So right here we have our style sheets. These are all CSS files. So as you know, we have style.css right here in the middle that's already opened for us in the text editor. And then inside of the CSS folder itself, we have the font awesome, which is going to help us add these fonts or icons that we're seeing here. And then we have the CSS folder for the image slider here, which is called BX slider. So now let's drop down, and these last 3 tags that we're seeing here are all for jQuery. So these tags are going to help the image slider that we're seeing referenced here from the JS folder for the BX slider. It's going to help the slider run nice and smooth, I guess. So we're seeing like the really smooth transitions, and we're going to be pulling from the jQuery library that we see there to have the image slider work nice and smoothly for us. Okay, so now we can go ahead and get started. So just remember to have your index.html document open in your web browser and in your text editor. So the first thing that we're going to do is the big section here that we're seeing kind of centered in the page. So we're going to create what's called a wrapper. So we're going to call it div ID wrapper, and that's going to span all of the content that stays centered on the page no matter how wide we flex it before getting down to the blue footer section that's 100% of the page at the bottom. So just write div ID wrapper, and then we're going to actually close the div way at the bottom of the page here. So you can just create a little bit of space, and I'm going to make a note or a comment in HTML that won't display on the web browser, saying that this is the end of our wrapper, so we don't confuse the closing div tag later with anything else. Okay, so We're not going to see anything yet because that's just a divider tag. It's not an actual content tag in HTML. It's just going to help lay out the page. So the next tag that we're going to do is we're going to actually create another div ID, and we're going to call this the banner wrapper. So this is going to contain the header that has the logo and the navigation, and then it's also going to contain our image slider. So go ahead and write div ID banner dash wrapper, and then you can also cut this closing div tag from there, and we're going to add that to just underneath where the slider ends. Okay, so just close the div there, and now let's go back up, and as I said, we have the header and the slider within the banner wrapper. So let's drop down a line and start with the header. So we can just use the HTML5 tag here called header without using a div ID or a section or something. And then inside of the header, right here, we're also going to have an ID to allow for more control later in the CSS. So we're just going to call this div ID header dash inner. And some of the stuff that we go over here, I might not explain it completely while we're doing the HTML, but once we get into the CSS, you'll get a better in-depth look at why we're using certain divs and sections and that type of thing. So let's go ahead and open and close the div ID header inner. Okay, so this is going to contain the logo on the left and the navigation on the right, and then just underneath the header inner we're going to make a tag for the logo here. So this is going to be a link tag, which is ahref, or it's really the A tag. And for now, for the link itself, we're not going to put a URL. We'll just put the hashtag sign because we don't want it to send us anywhere since we're just making the front page. Normally, you'd link it to the front page itself with index.html. And then make sure you give it an ID called logo, and then it's up to you if you want to put a title in there. You can put the title of the website itself, Rocket Design, so when people hover over it, a little title appears. So that's up to you. Now let's drop down beneath that and we'll create the navigation next. Okay. So as I said, this is where you would put index.html to link it back to the same page. So if I click on it now, it's going to send us back to the home page. So that's up to you. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get started with our navigation. So just write NAV in this tag, which is the HTML5 tag for navigation menus. Okay, so the first thing that we'll do with the navigation, rather than getting started with the unordered list, which would create all of the navigation menu links that we're seeing there. So basically, we have the unordered list, then we have the list items with the links for each navigation menu link. We're going to create this hamburger icon first because that's what we're going to kind of hover over first before we get the unordered list to display, at least in the mobile version, right? So let's go ahead and create a link. So just write the ahref tag, and then we don't want to send it anywhere. So put the hashtag symbol there for the link, and then for the ID, just put menu icon. And later in the CSS, we're going to add the little blue hamburger thing for the menu icon. Now let's do the unordered list. So the unordered list is going to nest all of the list items. So that's what appears when we hover over the icon there in the mobile version. Okay, so that's just going to be UL, and then let's drop down, and within that we'll do our first list item with the navigation menu link called Home. So for this, we'll just link back to the home page itself with index.html, and then we're also going to give this a class because that's what page we're on, and we'll call that current. So later in the CSS, we'll tell the current class to display at a different color here than the rest of the navigation menu items. Okay, so now if we go and refresh the page that we're working on here, we'll see our first of the content and navigation menu links displaying on the screen. So now let's drop down underneath the home link here at the top, and let's create our next navigation menu link. So do the li and then ahref, and we're not going to send this anywhere, so we'll just put the hashtag symbol there, and then we'll make the skills link. So in between the A tag for the link, just write skills, and then we'll drop down to the next line. We'll do another list item and then our link, and then hashtag for the link rather than a URL, and we'll write portfolio, and then we'll just do it with the next two, which are our team and contact. So if you're wondering how I'm getting the tags to display so quickly, by the way, here in Sublime Text, once you see it pop up on the little pop-up that appears as you see right here, you just hit enter, and then it will write out the rest of the tag for you. Okay, so now if we save and refresh, here we have all of our navigation menu links displaying in the unordered list at the top left of the screen here. Alright, so now we can drop down underneath the header and get started on our image slider. So some of the content or code needed for the slider is already here for us. You just want to add our HTML for the image slider where it says add image slider HTML here. Alright, and then the first thing that we'll do is we're going to create a div class. So just open and close your div, and then we're going to call this div class slider wrap. Okay, and then within that we're going to create a section class. So section is an HTML5 tag, and then we'll give it a class and we'll just call it slider. Alright, and then close that and close the section tag out. Okay, and later obviously we're going to reference this stuff in the CSS. Now we're going to create an unordered list similar to what we did with the navigation, but for the images in the slider. So just create an unordered list with UL, and we're going to give the unordered list a class and call it slider1 without any dashes or spaces here. And then we'll create our list items. So rather than a link like the navigation, we're going to have our images. So the image tag is img src for image source, and now we'll reference the images that are already included for us here in the starter files. So you'll need to reference the img folder followed by the pics folder. So write img / and then pics, P-I-C-S, and then / and then the image. So this is just going to be desktop-1.png. Okay, so let's go back over to the version that we've been working on here in Google Chrome, at least for me, and there we have our first image slider image showing up here. And as you can see, it's already kind of doing its transitions in the background because the jQuery is already added for us. So let's just add the other two images, and then we can wrap up the image slider rather quickly here. So remember to do img and then pics to reference the image in the folders. And then this one is just going to be desktop-2.png, and then the third will be desktop-3.png. Alright, and then we can go ahead and see the image slider in its full effect, at least until we add the style later to give it its size and correct the position of it. So we're going through all 3 slides here with the coffee, the desktop computers, and the next thing that we'll do is I'm just going to get rid of this little note here, which we don't need anymore, and do away with this extra space. Okay, so let's drop down underneath the div that was for the banner wrapper that follows the slider end HTML comment, and we can get started with the 1/3 sections that have the icons in them. So let's take a look at those. So each 1/3 section is going to contain the icon circle, or the circle with the icon in it, and the heading tag that's in there beneath it. So we'll have 3 1/3 here for this section at least. So go ahead and reference it with a section class. So go ahead and open and close your section tag, and then write 1-third, and then inside of that we're gonna have a div class so we can create the circle, the colored circle that we're seeing here, and inside of that we'll add the icon. So this is going to be styled separately from the icon itself. So we're just going to call this icon wrap. So write div class icon wrap, icon dash wrap, and close your div. And then within that, we'll go ahead and reference the icon. So to center it best, we're going to have this in a table data tag, and this is going to be referencing the font awesome icon. So if you want to add your own icons in here, just do a Google search for font awesome, and then you can figure out what the class is you need to reference for the particular icon you want to use. So we're going to put the icons inside of a table data tag here, which will help us center it later on in the CSS, and just write I class, and then we'll reference this one here, which is FA space FA dash desktop for a desktop computer. Alright, now the I, so you know, doesn't actually mean icon. That's the italic tag in HTML, but this is how Font Awesome references the icon, so that's what we'll use. Okay, so there we have our little desktop icon displaying there in Google Chrome, by the way. And now let's add the heading tag for the web design text here. So we're going to use a heading 3 tag. Whoops, let me just change this. Heading 3, and then just write web design and close the heading 3 tag. So as you may already know, in HTML we have heading 1 being the largest all the way down to heading 6 being the smallest. Okay? And now if we refresh, we have our heading 3 text showing up here underneath the desktop icon from Font Awesome. Alright, so let's drop down and let's create the next 1/3 section class here. So just open and close your section tag and then write class 1 1-third, and then we'll do similar to what we did last time with the div class icon wrap, and then we'll reference our icon and heading 3 text. So just again write div class icon dash wrap, and then we'll do our table data tag followed by the I class, and this is going to be a pencil, square, and then O. So write FA space FA dash pencil dash square dash O. Okay, and then if let's just do our heading 3 and then we'll check out that icon. So this is going to be just digital graphics. Okay, so there we have our pencil with the square around it. And now let's do the third 1/3 section, which is going to be for the development title there. So just write section class 1-third, and then drop down and we'll do the div class icon wrap, and you guys are welcome to copy and paste the stuff from above, but I think it's good to just write it out here for practice. And then this again is going to be called development, and then we'll do the icon for it last. Okay, and then go up and in between the div class icon wrap, which will later, as I said, give us the blue circle styling that we're seeing. Just write TD and then the I class, and this one is going to be similar to the square O for pencil. We'll do FA space FA dash file, because this is a file, dash code O. So it's a kind of a code file there with the HTML closing tag. Alright, and then if we refresh, here we have our HTML file icon and then the development text beneath that. Alright, so now we can move on to our next section, and what I'm going to do is, well, we're going to create this left column section here with the paragraph text. Okay. So I'm going to create some notes first to sort of section off the page though. So let's just write with a little comment here, if you want, above the 1/3 sections, that this is where the start of the 3 column icons appears. And I forgot an N there in column, but that's alright, because as you know, with these comments here, nobody's going to see this but us. Alright, so beneath that, let's go ahead and start our next section, which is going to be the paragraph text on the left. So we're just going to call this section class left-col, C-O-L, for left column, and then let's add the paragraph text in here. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and just copy and paste this paragraph text, and you can put whatever text you want in here in the meantime, or just make something up. And then the paragraph tag is just the letter P. So later we'll add some indentation when we're styling it in the CSS, but for now, just having the paragraph text there itself will suffice, and we can move on to the next section, which is the sidebar section containing this image here. So this, as you see, it has a plain white background, and you might not notice that the background of the actual website is kind of like an off-white blue shade, and we'll get to that shade later in the style sheet. So we're going to call this section class sidebar, and then we'll just reference the image that's in it. Okay, so that's going to be this computer-white.png image. So again, we'll do img/pics/computer-white.png. Okay, and then if we refresh here, it's a nice big picture here, taking up the whole screen, and it blends in with the background right now with the inherent white background for Google Chrome, which is nice. Okay, so if you're wondering where I'm getting these pictures from that are nice and clear and free to use, it's called Pexels, so P-E-X-E-L-S, and it's a great resource for free pictures. Alright, so now let's drop down and start with some more 1/3 sections. So this time we're going to reference the heading style, and then we're going to do the images that we're seeing beneath there. And the middle one, as you see, includes the dimensions of the image if you want to add your own in here, 900 by 644 pixels. And then underneath the images we're going to do some paragraph text. Okay, so now let's go ahead and drop down. So we're actually going to give this a different class from the first 1/3 sections we did, because we're going to have some padding in between these sections. So instead of just calling this, and I'm going to write a quick note here that this is where the end of the left column and sidebar is, but instead of calling it just simply 1-3rd, we're going to call it 1-3rd-padding for the section classes, because we're going to add some padding in between them in the style sheet. So just write section class 1-3rd-padding, and then open and close your section class. And first we'll just reference the heading up here, which is going to be the same size heading that we used earlier, the H3. So just write H3 and open and close the heading tags. And then this is just going to be called R skills 1, but you can write whatever you want in here. Okay, and then drop down and we're going to reference our image. So this is going to be img/pics/computer-gal.png. Okay, and then drop down and we'll do our paragraph text. And I'm just going to copy and paste this paragraph text here. Alright, I'll just paste it in. And then for the ampersand sign, that in HTML is just the ampersand and then spell out AMP and then semicolon. So let's refresh. There we have our heading 3 and then the picture beneath that, which looks like a design type agency environment, which is pretty cool. Alright, and then we have the paragraph text beneath that also. Alright, so let's drop down and create our next section class 1/3 padding here. So open and close your section and then class 1-3rd-padding. Alright, and then we'll reference the heading 3. This is going to simply be called R skills 2, Okay, and then drop down and we'll do the image. So img source, and this one is going to be img/pics, and then it's just going to reference the size of the actual image. So 900-644.png. Okay, and drop down, and lastly we'll do the paragraph text here. And this is the same as before, but I'll just copy it again. And then remember to change the ampersand sign if you're going to put the same text in here, but you can put whatever you like. So ampersand AMP and then semicolon. Okay, so now let's just drop down and we'll do the third of the 1/3 padding sections here. And the image that we'll reference for this section is going to be called computer-guy.png. So go ahead and drop down a line and we'll do the last of the 1/3 padding sections here with section class 1-3rd-padding. And then, as you probably remember, we'll do the heading 3 tag, and we'll just call the third one rskills3. Okay, and then drop down, and again the image that we'll reference, it's going to be img/pics/computer-guy.png, and then I'll just create that same text here. So if you're wondering why all the images are PNG, this is just like a default image extension that I use normally, and PNGs, if you remember, you can use with transparent backgrounds, so images that have no background image to them. So for icons and stuff like that, for example, with the hamburger icon for the drop-down navigation, that's PNG, for example, as well as the fave icon with transparent or no backgrounds to them. Alright, so that does it for the 1/3 padding sections here. So let's move on down the page and we can start with our footer layout. So now what we're going to do is drop down underneath the banner wrapper tag that we created earlier, or I'm sorry, not the banner wrapper, but the regular wrapper right here that we created as the first tag and first divider in the whole page. And let's just write that the footer section is now starting underneath that wrapper tag, or end wrapper tag for the divider. So you can write whatever you like here. I'm just going to write start footer. And this is going to be 100% of the screen, so we don't need any wrapper here. But inside of the footer itself, with the blue background, we want the content to still be centered on the page and have a max width to it. So as you can see, the blue here is 100%, but the content within it, we want to stay centered and have a max width here. So we're going to give that a wrapper itself, which will keep it staying the same width no matter how wide the website gets. So similar to what we did up at the top of the website for the header and the slider, we're just going to call this div ID banner wrapper. So let me just show you real quick. So there we go right here, div ID banner wrapper. All right. And then make sure to close the div out just above where the footer tag ends. And inside of that, we're going to create our next section, and this is going to be called div class So this is going to be div class, and we'll call it icon text. So this is just going to be for the navigation right here. So basically, when we style it later, we're going to give icon text a certain width of the page, and then we'll create another similar divider for the social icons that we're seeing on the right. So just call it icon-text. And then within this div, we're going to create one more div class to allow for more styling later on. So we're just going to call this one icon-text-icon, and then drop down, and after that we'll create another one, and let's call this div class icon-text-text. So the first will be for the navigation menu on the left in the footer, and the second icon-text-text will be for the social icons on the right. Well, I guess the first one make more sense if the first one was icon-text-text, but that's all right. So within icon-text-icon, we're gonna create our navigation menu now. So similar to what we did for the navigation at the top of the website, we're going to create an unordered list. So just write UL and then give yourself a little space here for the unordered list, and we're going to give this a class called footer-nav. Okay, and then let's go ahead and reference our list items. So just write li, and then inside of the list items create a link, and we'll just give the first one a link to the index.html page itself, and let's call this, or it's up to you again, if you want to do a title you can, but I'll just leave that out. So a title, if you remember from earlier with the logo, if you add a title, so title equals, in quotations, the title of whatever it is somebody is hovering over on your website. So if we were linking to other pages, right here you would do skills.html for the second navigation link. Since we're not linking it to any other pages right now, I'll just put the hashtag symbol, and then we'll write skills for that one, and then let's do list item ahref, and then this is for the portfolio page. Okay, and then we'll do the our team page, and then we'll do the contact page last. So without trying to do a little sales pitch here, if you want to see how they all link together, just go to in the description of the video, I'll have a link to the full version of the template, so you can watch a quick video and see how they would link to the other pages at the bottom of the website there. Okay, so now we have our navigation links at the bottom, which is looking similar to the top until we style it later on. And now let's do another unordered list for the social media and email icons. So just write UL and then create some space, and we're going to call this unordered list UL class social. Alright, and then drop down and get your first list item going. So the first one that we do is going to be an email icon. So just write LI and then A for the link. And for the email link, if you want when somebody clicks on it, for them to be prompted to send an email with whatever is inherent on their computer as their email provider, you can write mail to : and then the email address you want them to send you a message at, and then when they click on that link with the icon, their email is going to pull up. All right, and then within the LI and then the link, we'll do the icon itself, and this one will be iClass FA space FA dash envelope. All right, so now we can go refresh the version that we've been working on here in Google Chrome, and we'll see our little email link at the bottom of the page there. All right, so the next one is going to be a Facebook link. So as I run through these, you can put your own social links in here, or you can copy what I'm doing. So I'm just going to paste my own links right in here. Or for this one, I'll type out, because the Facebook one is actually pretty simple for the W3 Newbie Facebook page. So facebook.com/W3 Newbie, and then let's do the Facebook icon. So iClass and then FA space FA dash Facebook. So the social media ones are pretty self-explanatory. And then let's do the third, which is for Google+. Okay, and I'll just write my Google+ web address out, which is also fairly simple. Okay. And then for the icon, write iClass, and this one is going to be FA space FA dash Google dash plus. All right, and then refresh, and we should have Facebook and Google added down here. Okay, good. And then we just have Twitter and YouTube left. So if you wanted to replace the email or something with Instagram, I think that's just FA space FA dash Instagram if you wanted to add that one. And then you could link to your Instagram page if you like. All right, so I think my YouTube and Twitter are kind of the same URLs. So I'll just type it out here. All right, and then icon, so iClass. And this one is going to be just FA space FA dash Twitter. All right, and then drop down, and let's do the last one, which is for YouTube. So HTTPS, and then youtube.com user dash, or forward slash rather, Drew on Q. And please do remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more videos like this. And then let's just do the icon. So it's iClass, and then FA space FA dash YouTube. And if anyone's watching this soon after its release and you already did subscribe, thanks so much for subscribing. I've had a lot of subscribers since I made not the very last video, but the one before that. So thanks so much for subscribing. Okay, so now let's drop down and let's do the second section of the footer. So we'll want to drop down actually underneath the HTML5 tag footer itself, and we're going to create another HTML5 footer tag, but we're going to give this one a class. So write footer class second for the second footer that we're using. And a common term for the section at the very bottom of the page, though there's no tag for this, is called the socket. So underneath the footer, it's the socket that is the little thing with the copyright info and such. So we're just going to write ampersand copy and then semicolon to create this little copyright symbol in HTML, and then I'll just write rocket design period, and you could put the date or year if you want to, also if you're doing a copyright type thing for your website. Alright, so that ends the footer sections. I'll just create a quick comment here saying end footers, and then let's get rid of some of the extra space here at the bottom of the website. I like to make sure there aren't any lines that go unused and try to make the layout pretty clean. And that does it for all of the HTML for this entire tutorial. The rest of the video is going to be focused on all of the styling. So we're going to create a number of CSS styles and really get a feel for how the HTML and CSS interact with the div IDs and div classes and referencing the bare HTML5 tags. So let's move over to style.css and get started here. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to reference here in our styling is the HTML document itself. So that's the little asterisk that we're seeing right here, and that's going to give it a margin 0, border 0, and padding 0. So any inherent style that the web browser wants to put on it, we'll take it away there with the margin 0, padding 0. And that's why the image that we're seeing in the version that we've been working on is lined up right at the edge of the screen. So the next thing that we're going to style is the body of the website or HTML document itself, and we'll get to that import line at the top in just a minute. So for the body, let's give it the background color. So if you remember from this image here that was plain white, the background color is going to kind of be like an off-white blue color. And the way that we'll reference that is going to be with the hex value. So just write background : and then the hex value is going to be hashtag F1, F6, F8. And then let's give it a font family that's inherent for the document or body. And that's going to be sans serif. And then we'll just give it margin 0 auto to center the body of the website on the page. Alright, so if you want to use your own background color and you're trying to figure out what the hex value thing is with the hashtag and then the 6 characters, just do a quick Google search for hex color picker, and then you can pick your own color using the hex value system there. So now let's style the paragraph text, and we're going to reference the font family that's in the import URL here at the top. So this font from Google Fonts is called Allegria Sans, and then we'll just make sans serif our backup font if for whatever reason the web browser doesn't recognize the Google font there initially. So for the color of the paragraph text, we're going to give it a hex value of 524 C56, and then if we refresh, it's going to be kind of like a lighter, it's not going to be black, it's going to be a bit lighter, like a really dark purple shade, off like in between the purple at the very bottom there and the socket or footer second and black. Alright, so now if we refresh, there's our paragraph text, and let's make it a little larger. So we'll give it a font size of 160%, and then we'll give it a line height of 155%, so it's a little condensed as for the height of the paragraph text. And then we'll give it a padding of 3% around the edge of paragraph sections, and then we'll indent the text 2%, and then we'll have it text align justify. So text align justify is going to give you straight up and down edges similar to like a blog article or newspapers. And then we have the little text indent there of 2% along with the line height, which makes it a little bit condensed there. Alright, so next let's do the heading 3 text. So that's going to be sans serif, so we don't need to give it a font family, but let's change the font size to 175%, and then we'll give it a line height also of 155%, and then a font weight. So a high font weight means bold, a lower one means narrow text or thin text. So we'll give it a font weight of 500, which is kind of semi-bold, and then we'll give it the same color that we gave the paragraph text above with the really dark off black purple shade. And then if we refresh, there we have the heading 3 text looking pretty good, but we want to center it. So instead of text align justify, let's do text align center, and then text transformation, we'll have it uppercase. And if we refresh, there we have it centered on the page, and I'm just going to give it a padding of 0. I think it has 0 padding anyways, but that's fine. We'll just leave that in. And then let's style next our links. Okay, so for our links, write A, and then we'll give it a color of the same color as above, so 524C56. And then text decoration none, so our links are not underlined. And then we'll give it a font weight of bold. Or you could do a font weight of, 500 or 700, and that would be pretty bold. All right. So later we'll style the both navigations and give them some different color there. But I like to give the links a color and take away any text decoration in case we have phone numbers in here especially. Otherwise it'll show up as blue and underlined on a cell phone. But let's give the links a hover color here also while we're at it. So the hex value for this is going to be C3D7DF for the color. And then if you refresh, when we hover over it, we'll have that sort of light blue shade that we're seeing when we hover over the links here. Alright, so drop down a line and let's take care of our images. So right now, images will kind of go outside of the screen if we don't change them. So let's do display block. We'll give it margin of 0 auto so they center. And then max width 100%. So they'll always be as wide or as narrow as the page width itself. So let me just show you really quickly. Right now, if we size it down, the image isn't going to come with the page, but if we refresh it, now the image is, except for the slider image, which we'll get to. But the rest of them are sizing down with the page itself, with the style we just gave it, especially with the max width 100%. Alright. So now let's go back to our style sheet here, and I'm just going to add margin bottom -4 pixels. So this is going to pull the text up a little bit here. And let's drop down, and the next thing that we're going to style is our first major div ID of the page, and that's going to be our wrapper. So with classes, we reference them in HTML with a period. With IDs, we reference them with the hashtag, if you remember. So let's go ahead and just start that with hashtag wrapper, open and close the swirly brackets, and then we're going to give this a max width of 1200 pixels. So nothing on the inside of the wrapper can go wider than 1200 pixels, and then we'll give it a margin of 0 auto, which will center it on the page. So now if we refresh, there we have everything staying in the center no matter how wide we flex the website to, except for the stuff at the bottom right now because that's outside of our wrapper. Alright, so let's drop down and let's go to the next div ID, and from here we're just going to be kind of running down the page and linking the IDs, classes, and HTML5 tags here to our style, or linking our style to the HTML tags, vice versa. So let's give this also a max width of 1200 pixels, which I guess we don't exactly need, but if you were to do away with the wrapper, at least the banner wrapper itself would still stay within that same space. And then we'll give it a padding of 0 top, 0 right, 3% bottom, and then 0 left. So the 3% bottom, or you can just do padding dash bottom 3%, is going to add a little bit of space underneath the slider there. So you may have seen the icons and heading 3s drop a little bit. And now let's drop down, and inside of the banner wrapper, if you remember, we have our HTML5 tag header. So let's go ahead and reference this, and we'll do everything inside of it afterwards. Okay, so we don't need a period or a hashtag for this, so just write header. We'll give it a a width of 100% and then a height of 100 pixels, and then we'll just say top 0 and left 0, so it's pulled all the way to the top left with 0 pixels in between it and the very top and very left of the website, or at least the div ID that it's nested within, which is banner wrapper at the 1200 pixel max width. Alright, so now let's reference the logo, the RD logo in the upper left. So let's give the logo a margin of 20 pixels, and then we'll tell it to float to the left side of the screen, which just basically means push off to the left when you display. And then we'll give it a width of 200 pixels and a height of 60 pixels. And next we're going to give it a background URL, which will be the icon that we're seeing, or the logo, however you want to describe the little RD symbol there. So that's going to be in our icons folder. So that's img/icons rather than pics, and then rd-dark.png, and then you want to tell it to not repeat and center. Okay, so if we refresh, there we have our RD logo matching up with the original here when we go back and forth from the screens. And if you wanted to see where that is, it's in icons, and then here it is right here, rd-dark.png. Okay, so now let's move on to our navigation. But before we do, let's create a quick note in the CSS or comment saying that our navigation is starting. So it's a little different from the HTML comments. You just want to do a / and then an asterisk, and then anything within that is the comment, which won't make a difference with the CSS. You can write whatever you like. So if you remember from our HTML, our navigation is just going to be referenced with the NAV tag, which is the HTML5 tag for navigation menus. And that's going to display after our logo that we just added in the upper left. So instead of floating it to the left like the logo, we're going to float the navigation to the right. So float right, and then we'll give it some padding. So padding, and we'll give it a 25 pixel padding on the top. So now we have it off to the right hand side. Okay, so 25 pixels on the top, 20 pixels on the right, and then 0 on the bottom and the left. Okay, now if we refresh, it's going to kind of push it down there, and some of it's going to be displaying underneath the slider right now, but we'll correct that in just a moment. So drop down one more line, and then let's add some style to, or for, the icon that's going to display on the mobile version. So we're not going to see this while it's displaying at full width, but later when we style the media queries, which is the responsive part of the CSS, we're going to reference this icon again so it displays at all times. So for now, we'll just reference that with the ID. So hashtag menu-icon, and then write display hidden, because we don't want it to display right now at full width. And then we'll give it its width, height, and then the image itself. So for the height and width, we'll do 40 pixels for the icon. And then similar to the logo, we'll add the background style, and then we'll give it the URL for the hamburger menu. So that's going to be img/icons/nav-dark.png. Okay, and then just write center. All right. So let's drop down again and style our unordered list. So the unordered list is kind of just what contains the navigation right now. And we're going to do away with the little dots that display inherently with the unordered list. Okay, so let me just show you also the unordered list on the mobile version before we style it here in the CSS. So basically on the mobile version, when we hover over the menu icon, it's going to display the unordered list for the navigation. So that's what we're seeing there. But for now, let's go ahead and do away with the inherent ordered list dots that we see to the left of the list items in the unordered list. So just write UL list style none. Okay, so that's going to do away, as I said, with the dots there for the ordered or unordered list rather. And let's drop down and reference our individual list items next. So that would be the LI. So to reference those, we'll first reference the navigation, the unordered list, and then the list item itself. And let's start by giving it its font family. So here is the sort of sequence to get to the list item that we're referencing in the HTML. And we're going to give it the Allegra Sans font. So write font family and then in a single quote, Allegra Sans, and then the fallback font is going to be sans-serif. Okay, and then drop down, and if we refresh right now, we'll have a change in font, but let's also give it the font size here. So there's a bit of a change, but it still looks kind of small there. So we're going to increase the size by 50%. So the next style is font-size 150%. Okay, so now if we go back to the original, you'll see that that's the size that we want. And then let's tell it to display inline block so they line up next to one another. And then we'll tell it to float to the left within the actual unordered list. So there we have it. And then we just need to add some padding between them, and then we can color them. So just write underneath the float left padding 10 pixels. So that'll be 10 pixels all around, and that'll make it line up pretty nicely. Alright, so now it's in line with the original here. We just need to add the style, or the color. So drop down another line and we'll reference the links first. So write nav ul li and then a for the links, and then we're going to give it that same blue color for the logo and the hamburger menu icon link right here. So the hex value for this blue color is 6991AC. Okay, and now let's go back to the one we've been working on and refresh. Okay, so now they're all showing up as that blue color, but what we want is to have the home link a different color, the current menu icon. So we'll just reference that with the current class that we gave that first one right here, And if ultimately you create more pages, you can just change the current class to whatever page you're working on to give that particular page the different color. So the hex value for this is 3F5767. Okay, and then let's also reference the hover color, which I think this is going to be the same with the link color that we gave before, but just for good measure, the hex value for when we hover over the links is A5BDCD. Okay, and then refresh, and there we have the home link, darker than the rest, and we have the hover color there. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is drop down to the image slider. So we're going to make that slider of the full width of that section, but let's say that our navigation is ending, because we did make a note or comment saying where it started. So just make a comment saying this is where our navigation ends, and then we'll reference the slider with the slider class, so period.slider, and give it a max width of 1200 pixels. Underneath that, let's reference, there's another class in here for the slides, and that's the unordered list class. So we don't need to write UL, we can just do the class reference for that and make it so the image flexes the full 1200 pixels. So just write .slider1 image, and then width 100%, max width 1200 pixels, and then margin 0 auto, which will center it on the page. Okay, and then refresh, and there we have it. Now we might have just been able to get away with only using the 100% width there, but let's drop down and style the controls next. So actually we're just going to do away with them, the little previous and next buttons that we're seeing down underneath the slider. So we'll reference that with the slider class, followed by the bx-wrapper class, and then bx-controls-direction A, and then I'm just going to write display none. Okay, and then if we refresh, these little previous and next buttons will disappear. Okay, so now it looks much cleaner. Alright, so now we can drop down and do the first of the sections underneath the navigation and the image slider, and that's going to be the 1/3 sections that contain the headings and the icons above inside of the circles. Okay, so first let's reference the actual section that all that is nested within, and that's the section class 1/3, and then we can do the icon wrap after that. So we'll just reference that with .1-third, open and close the brackets, and then give it a width of 33.333 and so on %. So it's going to be exactly 1/3 of the page with 0 margin and 0 padding around it. Okay, and then drop down underneath that, and we'll tell them to float to the left side of the screen, and then text-align justify, or I'm sorry, text-align, let's do text-align justify, and then I believe the headings we've already text-align centered. Yep. So Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. Doesn't really make much sense, but if you decide to add paragraph text or some other text inside of there, you can keep it as either text-align justify or text-align center. So let's drop down and style the icon-wrap class here. So just write dot icon-wrap, and then we're going to have this center. So this is going to be the blue background that we're seeing behind the actual icon. So write margin 0 auto to get it centered on the page, and then we'll give it, or in the section at least, and then we'll give it a width and a height of 120 pixels. Then the border radius, so let's refresh. So we're not really going to see the border radius until we add the color, but this is going to give it the circle feel. So we'll give it a border radius of 125%, and then we'll tell it to text align center, so the icons will center inside of there. And then let's give it the background color, which is that same blue shade that we've been working with. So there we're seeing the space that it's taking up. And the hex value for the blue color that we've been working with is, again, 6991AC. So that's the same shade here as the logo. Okay, and then there we see it. And then let's also give it some margin above it to space it out from the image slider. So drop down and we'll give it margin top of 8%. And then we'll also give it margin bottom of 3%. So you could write 8%, 0, 3%, 0, or you can do margin top and then margin bottom. That's up to you. Alright, so the circles themselves are in line, but we'll need to style the actual icons. So we're going to reference those with the I class, or with the I itself. We don't really need to use the class for the individual icons. So just write dot icon dash wrap, and then I, and then we're gonna give these, or tell them to text align center. We'll give them a color that's kind of an off-white. All white is just all F's, but this is going to be F0, F0, F0. And then we'll give it a font size of 450%, which is about 4.5 times the size that it is right now. And then we'll give it padding all around of 20%. Okay. So there we have our icons. Now we can't really tell the original from the one we've been working on, at least from the 1/3 sections up, so it's looking pretty good. So the next thing that we're going to style is going to be the left column. So this is the left column that appears next to the image here. So that's just going to be the paragraph text. Okay, so we're going to kind of pull that paragraph in off to the left. So we'll reference that with the left col or left column class. So just write dot left dash col, open and close the brackets, and then we'll tell it to float to the left side of the screen. And we'll give it a margin 0 auto. And the width for this, the left column plus the side on the right is not going to be 100% with the width alone, because we want to give them some padding. So for this one, at least to start, we're going to have a width of 60%. Okay, and then we'll have padding, or let's give it a height. There we go. And it's looking pretty good. But let's also give it a height of auto, and we'll give it padding 1% all around. Okay. So later I'll show you in just a minute or two how we're going to create some more padding in between the sections here. But let's do the sidebar now. So we'll reference that with that sidebar class for the image. And we're going to tell this one to float right rather than floating left, like the left column. And then we'll tell it margin 0 auto to center it. And the width for this is going to be 32%. You could actually probably give it a couple more percentage here, but that's fine. And then we'll tell this one to have a height of auto also and give it a padding 1%. Okay, so now if we refresh, that big computer image is going to pull up to the right of the sidebar, or the right of the left column rather. Okay, so let's drop down next and we'll do the other 1/3 section. So this, if you remember from the HTML, is different from the 1/3 that we did above because it's going to have some padding in between the actual sections. Or I think we're going to add margin actually. So let's reference that with the 1/3 padding class here, and we're going to give that a width of 29% instead of the 33.333 and so on percent that we did for the previous 1/3 section. And we'll tell it to float to the left, and we'll give them a margin of 2% all around. So if you just do 2, by the way, 2 values when you're giving margin or padding, it's the first is top and bottom, and the second is left and right. And then if you remember, if you're doing all 4, it's top, right, left, or sorry, top, right, bottom, left. And as we scroll down through the website, we're going to notice that a lot of the stuff here is not in line. So we'll take care of that in just a moment. Let's add one more style to the 1/3 padding class though, and we'll just tell the text to align justify. So it looks the same as the rest of the paragraph text up here. And then let's go ahead and add something that's going to make the whole page kind of line up, and then we can also add some padding with that in between the sections that was kind of mentioned earlier. For example, the 1/3 sections that we're seeing with the left column there on the page, we'll create some padding there. So go ahead and drop down first off underneath the 3 column sections with the icons that we're seeing in blue with the circles. And we're just going to call this div class clear fix padding. Okay, so let's add a couple more of these throughout the page. Basically, after any main sections that are going to be in line with one another. So we'll add another one after the sidebar here before the 1/3 padding sections start. Okay. And that may be all we need. For good measure, we can add another underneath the 1/3 padding sections if you like. But we probably don't need it because of the the end of the wrapper there. So, alright, let's go ahead and style these clearfix paddings. So just write .clearfix dash padding, and the main style here is just called clear both. So that's going to create kind of an invisible horizontal line saying that this section has been cleared and nothing will display in line with this clear both style here. And then we're going to give it some padding, and it's just going to be 2% all around. So if we refresh, there we have everything lining up nicely because we've added that kind of invisible horizontal line in between the sections. But once we add the padding, it's going to space out quite nicely for us. So I'll just add 2% here. If you want to space it out a little more, you can add 3% or less with 1%. But that's going to bring us pretty close to the original with 2% there. Okay, so that does it down to the bottom of the 1/3 padding sections. Now we can move on to the footer. So since it's kind of sectioned off from much of the rest of the page, we should just create another note or comment in the CSS saying that this is where the footer CSS is starting. So now let's go ahead and get started styling the footer. So the first thing that we're going to reference is the actual HTML5 footer tag here that the rest will be nested within. So we'll just write footer, and then we're going to give that the background color, the same blue shade we've been working with. So let's scroll down so we see what we're doing here. Okay, so this, because we don't have a wrapper, is going to span 100% of the screen, and that's just the 699 1AC hex value, which your text editor probably remembers by now. And then we're just going to give that a width of 100%. So there we see it now starting to take form. Okay, so let's style the next thing underneath the footer. So actually in the HTML, the next thing would be the banner wrapper that's centering the unordered list that we're seeing with the navigation and the social media stuff. So underneath the banner wrapper, since that's already styled for us, we'll go with the div class icon text. So just write .icon -text, and we're going to make this one 100% of the banner wrapper, which is 1200 pixels, I think. And then let's tell it to display in the center. So we'll just write margin 0 auto. And then we can get to the navigation under that. Okay, so here we have the class for the navigation. Actually, the one with the text is the icon text icon, and one with the icons is icon text text. So we'll do icon text icon first. So just write .icon -text -icon, and then we're going to tell this to float to the left side of the screen. So float left, and then we'll give it a width of 20 pixels, or I'm sorry, 20% rather. And then let's give it a padding all around of 4%. And that's going to, for the most part, or the main thing, create the padding above and below that we're seeing on the full width version, or really both versions, mobile and full width. Okay. So let's go ahead and style the second main section in the footer. So this is the icon -text -text section, and then we'll get back to the navigation there on the left. So icon-text-text, which will contain the social media icons. So we'll give this a width of 64%. We'll tell it to float to the left, and then we're going to give it a padding of 4% on the top, 4% on the right, and 2% on the bottom, 0 on the left, because we're going to float to the left. If we refresh it, we're not going to see a lot of changes yet, but we'll see that at least it has the padding. And actually, let's take away the font size, because we're going to give the icons themselves the font size in a bit. Okay, so now let's get back to the navigation on the left. So that is the footer nav class, unordered list footer-nav. So let's just reference that with dot footer-nav, and then we're going to have the text align to the right. So write text align right rather than left, which is inherent in what it's doing right now. So if we refresh, there we have it kind of pulling off to the right side. And let's give the font some size, color, and see how it looks after that. So write dot footer-nav and then A for the navigation links, and then let's give it a font size of 160%. So font size 160%, and then we're going to give it kind of like a light blue off-white color. And that hex value, this is the same that we did for the navigation earlier, so, or the hover at least for the navigation at the top. So that's the C3D7DF hex value. And we're going to make it kind of like a narrow font weight rather than bold. So we'll give it a font weight of 300. So if you remember, bold is like 500 to 700 font weight. Alright, so now it's looking pretty good, but we're going to want a little bit of color when we hover over it. So let's do that now. So just write the same thing basically except for :hover after footer nav A, and then let's give that color, we'll just make it white or off-white. So that's F5, F5, F5. If you remember, all white is just all F's, and then if you add numbers and stuff to that, it's going to get a little lighter, like F5 or F7. It's pretty good. Alright, so now we can get started with the social icons since our navigation is done. So that is going to be in an unordered list similar to the navigation, and that one is called just social. So let's go ahead and get started with it. So we'll reference that with dot social for the social class, and let's give it a list style type of none, and then we're going to align it. So text align center, and now it's aligned in the icon text section. And then let's drop down and we'll style the actual list items, and let's tell them to display inline, similar to the navigation at the top of the website, lining up horizontally next to one another. And then let's style the individual icons next. So there they are, lining up quite nicely. And then for the icons, we'll reference them with social I, dot social I. Okay, and let's give it some font size first. So we'll give it a font size of 420%, and then margin of 1% all around. And then let's take a look at how it is. Okay, so it's kind of big, and we're going to want some space in between them individually. So let's also add some padding there. So we're going to give it a padding of 5% all around except on the left. So padding 5% top, 5% right, 5% bottom, and then 4% left. So it's going to kind of pull it in a little bit more to the left side. Okay, so it's looking pretty close to the original, but they're kind of bigger. So let's make these a little smaller. But first, let's give them the color. So the color for this is going to be the same as the navigation before we hover over it. It's C3D7DF. And we're actually going to have it the same as the hover. So if we refresh, there it is. Okay, so social I hover, and then we'll just give it the same F5 hex value for when we hover over the icons. Okay, so color F5, and now there we have them displaying pretty close to the original. It's a little bigger, and noticing that the email is actually a different icon. So we'll change that in the HTML. I think all it needs is for a -O to be added to the icon class for the email symbol. So let's go ahead and before we get to those changes, let's just do the footer class second. So just write footer.second, and we'll create the little purple space at the bottom. So we're going to give this a small border. So that's going to be this kind of green color. So border top 1 pixel solid, and then the hex value is AADCD2. Okay, and then the background color is going to be this kind of purplish color. It's 544B59, and we'll give it a maximum height of 50 pixels. Okay, so max width 50 pixels. Then we'll have the text align center for the rocket design text or paragraph text, and then we'll give it margin 0. Okay, so now if we refresh, let's go to the version that we've been working on. So if we refresh, there we go. So we'll correct this in just a second. Let's add the rest of the footer second style for the paragraph text at the bottom, and then we'll correct the odd overlapping or overflow that we're seeing down there. Along with the size, we'll change the icons and the email icon. So just write footer.second and then P, open and close the brackets, and then write padding 5 pixels top, 0 right, 9 pixels bottom, 0 left. Then we want the text to align center, which we already did, I guess. And then color F5, F5, F5. We'll just give it the white color that we've been using as the hover for the footer, nav, and social icons. And then let's give it a font size. Whoops. We'll give it a font size of 160%, and then a line height of 155%, so the paragraph text space above and beneath isn't so tall, so 155%. Okay, so now refresh, and the text we're not able to see because it's blending with the background. So let's go ahead and let's correct the overflow here. So if you just go up to the actual footer style, underneath width 100%, just add overflow auto. So now it's not going to overflow into the other sections. Okay, and then if we save, refresh. Okay, so now it's lining up nicely. We've got the kind of little purple socket thing underneath there looking good. Let's just size the icons down slightly, and then we'll change that email icon also so it looks like the original. So go down to the font size for social I, and let's just change this to 380%. Okay, so that looks a little better. And then let's go to the HTML and change the class for the email icon there. So let's go over to the HTML, and basically all we need to do is at the end of that FA envelope class, just add -O, and that's going to kind of hollow out the email icon. Alright, so that does it for all of our full width styles. Now the only thing that should be our concern is that if we size the website down, it's going to look really funky. We're going to have stuff all over the place. So what we'll need to do next is focus on the media queries in the CSS, which is going to make it responsive. So let's pull up the finished version for how it's going to look on probably like an iPhone 7 type size, and then we'll run through the website top to bottom, making the changes to make it responsive for every section. Okay, so let's go back over to our style sheet and drop down under the footer second P or paragraph style and start our media queries. Okay, so let's write media screen and max dash width 768 pixels, and then open and close the brackets. And the most important thing with the media queries to remember is that all the styles are going to go within the media screen and max width style itself, so they need to be contained in those brackets. So first let's do the paragraph text here, and we'll just resize that so it's a little smaller to 130% instead of, I believe it was 160% before. And then let's do the heading 3 tags. So we'll just size those down a little also to 150%. And then after that, we'll do from the top, starting with our header. So just write header And then we're going to give that a height of 80 pixels rather than, I think it was 100 or 120 before. And then we're going to make the position relative. So one thing that you could do, if you like, with the position is have it fixed if you always want it to display at the top of the website there. And then let's do the logo. So basically we're just going to make the logo smaller by referencing a smaller image that we have in our images folder here. So the RD mobile dark. And then we'll just make the margin a little smaller. So let's do the margin first. So we'll reference that with the logo div ID and then margin 15 pixels top, 0 right, 20 pixels bottom, and then we'll pull it to the left a little, so negative 25 pixels left. And then let's reference the background image, which is the logo image itself. So just write background URL and then in parentheses img/icons/RD mobile dark. And then no repeat center. So that's mobile-dark.png, by the way. No repeat center. And then if we display, there we have the smaller logo appearing quite nicely and centered there off to the left. Now let's reference the menu icon. So before we didn't have it displaying at all. Now we're going to tell it to display inline block. Okay, and then we'll drop down and start on our unordered list. So it's not going to display just yet until we tell our unordered list not to display. So drop down a line and let's reference it with nav:hover ul for unordered list and write display block. Then one other thing to get the icon showing, or the hamburger drop down icon, right? Nav ul, comma, nav active ul, and then write display none. Okay, so now if we refresh the page, we're going to have the icon displaying here, but it's still kind of shaky. You can see the unordered list starting to display when we hover over the icon, but we still have some styling to do here. So let's say z index 1000, which will make it so at least it displays, or at least it should display on top of the other elements when we do that. And then write position absolute, and then we'll give it a padding of 20 pixels, and then the background color, which is going to be kind of that off-white F5 color. Now if we refresh, there we have it displaying. I think the position absolute plus the z index is what did the trick. But now let's position it, or let's give it a border and then we'll position it. So border, we'll give it 1 pixel solid. And this is going to be kind of like the off-white blue color from the navigation A5BD CD, and refresh. Okay, so there we have it. It's kind of a light border. And now let's position it. So we'll tell it to push off the right 20 pixels, and let's give it a width of 50% of the page. So it's pushing from the right side by 20 pixels and 50%. But now we need these list items to align in the center. So we'll do that in just a sec. Let's first add a little border radius. So we'll do 3 pixels, all except for the top right corner, which is the second value. So the border radius is just going to round off the corners a little bit there. So you can add more or less pixels for the border radius to see the changes that will make on it. And then let's give the actual unordered list an opacity for the background, or for everything with the unordered list itself, of 0.95. So that's going to make the background look a tiny bit transparent. So you can kind of see the image slider behind there, and you can change it to 0.9 if you want more transparency. But if you go too light, you might not be able to see the navigation, the drop down that well. So now let's style the list items themselves. So this is pretty simple. We're just going to tell them to text align center, and then we'll give them a width of 100% of the unordered list. So then refresh, and now it's looking pretty good. So if you want, you can add some padding to the list items, or you can just leave them as is. It's looking pretty close to the original there. So let's drop down underneath the navigation, and we can start or resume styling the main sections of the website. So the first thing underneath the header, including the navigation logo, and then the image slider, will be the 1/3 sections that have the icons in the blue circles, and then the heading 3 text underneath. So we're going to give each one of these a width of 100% of the screen. So let's just have them float to the left. That may not be necessary. I think we already have them floating left above, but the main thing is to give them that width of 100% of the screen. And then if we drop down, or we refresh, so it's displaying at 100%, but let's size down the icons, or the blue circle, and then the icons itself. So the blue circle is the icon wrap. Let's give that a height and width of 80 pixels instead of 120, and then we'll drop the margin on the top slightly so it doesn't space away that far from the slider. So height and width 80 pixels, and then margin top 3%. Okay, so now refresh, and it's looking pretty good except for the icons are too big. So let's style those next. We'll reference those with icon-wrap whoops, it's a 1. So icon-wrap I, and then let's give them a font size of 250%. I think it was somewhere around 400 before. Okay, and then the padding top of 27%. So that's going to kind of line them up inside of the icon wrap. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Okay, so let's drop down and move on to the next section. So that's going to be the left column section containing the paragraph text. So just write .left-col for the left column, and we'll give that also a width of 100%. and then padding 0. Okay, and then refresh, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, and now let's do that same thing for the sidebar. So write dot sidebar width 100%. Okay. Now our image will display quite nicely up until the edge of the screen there. And now let's style the 1/3 padding section. So instead of 100% for this, we're going to do 98%. So that leaves us with a tiny bit of space or padding off to either side. So write margin 0, padding 1%. Okay, so there we go. So now there's a little space off to the side of the pictures. So the next thing is our footer. So we don't actually have to style the footer tag itself, but we'll style the icon text icon section with the navigation within it, and we'll give that a width of 100%. And then we'll drop the padding down slightly. I think it was 4% earlier. So let's give it a padding of 0 top, 0 right, 2% bottom, separated from the icons, and then 0 left. And then next, let's style the icon text that the icons go inside of. And we'll give that a similar styling, so width 100%, and then padding, we just want padding on the top, so padding 2%, and then 0 for the rest, or you can just do padding top 2%. And then font size, let's go with 80% for the icons, which is a pretty big difference from what it was. Actually, we'll size those down a little bit more. So next, let's just center the footer nav. So footer-nav text align center rather than text align right. And then let's add some padding to the top. And we'll give it a padding top of 5%. So it's not lining up towards the top of the footer section there. And whoops, this is going to be dot footer-nav there. Okay, so now we have it centered, and then padding top 5%. All right, and then let's do the list items themselves. Let's just add a little bit of padding so they're not so close together, the navigation links. So padding 1% in between each individual line. Okay, so that looks a little cleaner. And then let's make the that text for the navigation slightly smaller. So here it is on the original. Or this is up to you what size you want to do. I'm going to go with font size 145% rather than, I think it was 180 or 160 before. I'm not sure. And then let's just size down the icons also down to 180%. Okay, and then refresh. Alright, so that is going to do it, you guys. So let's just scroll up here and make sure that everything we just styled matches to the original here with the drop down menu. And then let's just get a look at the mobile version here next to the full width to appreciate putting in 2 hours of work on this tutorial. So thanks so much for sticking around with me. I really appreciate it, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.